To you all. Welcome to the first meeting back to the IIRSM Southeast branch. My name's Lauren Crawley. I am the new webinar coordinator. So I'm really pleased to invite Karen Hewitt along today. She's the Director of Lead Alike Limited, the Health and Safety Engagement Specialist, and she's also author of one of my favourite books, which I have here, which is People Power, How to Transform Your Business in the Era of Safety and Wellbeing. And in 2023, Karen embarked on a mission to make health and safety simple, relevant and accessible to everyone. And she delivered a TED Talk entitled The 2 Questions That Could Save Your Life. So yeah, welcome Karen. Thanks for coming along. We're really grateful to have you.
Thanks, Lauren. And thanks very much for inviting me. This is actually my very first presentation to the IIRSM and my first presentation to this particular branch. And I'm local, I'm in Reading, so very, very excited to be here today. So thanks to everyone who's tuned in. Just to get a bit warmed up, I wonder if anyone could stick on the chat where they're dialing in from. I know that's an old-fashioned term, dialing in, but where are you in the world? And also, on a scale of 0 to 10, how comfortable do you feel about taking a risk with your risk communications? So if you're there listening on the other side, where are you? Where in the world are you? And on a scale of 0 to 10, how comfortable do you feel about taking a risk with your risk communications? Because this is the topic of the presentation today. And I realize that as a risk professional, everything we do is about mitigating risk, putting control measures in place and reducing the risk to a minimum. So it may cause us to be a little bit risk averse, whereas we might be natural risk takers. And what I'm going to be encouraging you to do today is to take a risk with your risk communication. So not a risk with the health and safety or anything else that your risk prevention work is around. Yeah, William says, not sure about the question. Brilliant. So let's say you're really scared stiff of taking a risk with your risk communication. So doing something different. So breaking away from the PowerPoint and maybe trying something a bit different. So a 0 if you're completely petrified about doing that. Maybe a 10 if you're feeling really comfortable, but you just want some new tools, or maybe if you're in the middle there, about a 7. So hopefully that makes the question a little bit clear. If not, it will become clear as we go along. I'm just looking to see where you're out there. So, we've got some people. Yes, interesting. Ready to take a risk, but restricted by the business. Yeah, because the business often does like PowerPoint. They like to have everything on the slides. And I've come up against this myself. Yeah, it's great to see where people are and who we've got on the chat. So I'm just going to get going, but feel free to use the chat. I've got it on my screen, so has Lauren. So if you want to ask questions, I might not always see these questions, Lauren, because I'm in the flow, but what we do is go back to them and see if we've got any questions at the end. But if you want to make comments, just feel to comment all the way through, and then we know you're there and you're listening. And it's really important to have you listening today. Obviously, I'm going to be doing my best to make this really interesting for you. But at the end of this session, so I'm going to talk for about 30, 40 minutes. I'm going to be asking for your feedback as we go so that it's not death by PowerPoint. And then I'm going to be asking for your questions at the end. And if you see anything that really jumps out at you today, so maybe it's a picture that you see on screen, just take a picture of it and you can use it to post on LinkedIn afterwards. Tag me, and I'm Karen J. Hewitt. And tag the IIRSM, particularly this branch. And we're going to look at the posts over the next 24 hours. And the most interesting posts, and I'll be the judge of that. It's going to be a bit subjective, but I'm dying to give away one of these, which is called the safety chat box. So this is a little box playing card size of 50 questions. And these are all questions to get people thinking differently about safety, but you could use it for health and safety, any other risk prevention exercise. And when we get to the section in here, I'll explain a bit more about what's in them. Okay, so I'm just going to get going now. And if you saw the session advertised and you decided to tune in, it was probably because maybe one of these questions intrigued you, that maybe you're having to communicate with different people at different levels in the organization, and you can't do a one size fits all. So how are you going to get different people, maybe with different risk perceptions, on board? How are you going to increase people's risk perception? And there may be certain groups that you think, I'm never going to do that, they're just risk takers, but they haven't fallen off your radar, you're just wondering how to do it. And you don't just want to influence them, you want to persuade them to take preventive action rather than be firefighting, managing the crisis. You want them to take action so that the accident or the incident does not occur. How do you get your messages to stand out and cut through the clutter? So we're doing an exercise on that right now. I'm trying to communicate in a way that's going to cut through the clutter, because probably as you're sat there, if you haven't put your phone on airplane mode, or you've got something else going on in the background, that I'm already struggling to get through the clutter, but I'm going to do my best here and make my messages stick around. So these are the 5 areas we're going to be looking at today. And I just wondered, maybe a little bit of fun on the chat. How many of these 5 questions did you answer yes to? So I'm going to put the questions back on the screen. Let's just see what you say. Let's get involved. How many of the questions did you say yes to? Okay, 5. Oh, that's good. 1. Yeah, so hopefully there'll be something for everybody. 2 out of 5. Yeah, and maybe you could probably actually drill down on these questions. Peter says 3, Martin says 2 out of 5, Bill says 2. Yeah, so there's probably sub questions within here. And I know as risk people, we like to drill down. So there's probably a lot more to this. This is quite general because we wanted to make sure we've got the right people on this webinar. Okay, brilliant. So let me just go back to the question. And let's look at what's the risk of your risk messages not getting through. So I know I'm sort of playing on words a little bit here. And the reason I'm doing that is because as risk professionals, we are really good at managing out the risk. And we tend to think of the risk of people not having the right working method, not doing the risk assessment, not having the right risk assessment. But we don't always think about the risk of not communicating effectively. In all the incident reports I've ever read, there's often a reference to communication, but not directly. And I don't think it's in the root cause analysis. But I'm just going to tell you a little story, a true story. And just to really give you a flavor of what we are risking if our messages are not getting through. So a couple of years ago, this is a true story. I'm telling this story secondhand. It's not my story. And I'm going to tell you what I read about this story and my conclusions. So you may remember in the north of England, I think it was a couple of years ago now, there was a tragedy. There was a storm in a playground in a school in the north of England, and very sadly, a little girl died. She was crushed by a tree. And when I read what had happened with this, it turns out that there was a maintenance company managing the trees for the school, and they were responsible for keeping those trees in good order. And it wasn't this particular tree. I've just found another tree just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. This tree had some decay in it, and this was the reason why the tree was vulnerable, and it came down in the storm. So you think about, as a risk professional, you've got all these factors. You've already got you know, the potential for a high impact incident because you've got children playing in the playground. You've got a storm as well. And then you've got the vulnerable tree. And actually, the maintenance engineer had spotted the decay in the tree. It was a known issue and had put this information into an IT system. And for some reason, there was a failure in the system. And this information that the tree was vulnerable never got to the school, which I think is really sad. And it's a story that illustrates that you can be doing all the right things. That information was noted, it was recorded, it was transmitted, but it didn't get through. So sometimes, in amongst all the clutter, everything people have on their plate, you really either have to go above and beyond and make a real fuss on what kind of information people need to transmit, how they need to do it, and how important it is. So you really need to really keep banging that drum and banging the drum differently for the message to get through. So this is why today I'm going to talk about three main topics. How do we communicate? So not just get information through. And obviously, you know, if you don't have a lot of time, if it needs to go to a mass audience, you may just need to get the facts out. But there's also a time to think about communicating, to engage, connect, and persuade, to get people to do things differently, to bring people together, because you've got a lot of different people in an organization. Yes, they all see things differently. You may have to adapt your communications, but you need to have some kind of guiding force to bring them together. Otherwise, everyone's going to be doing something different. And it's the power of that collective mission that really drives culture change. And also, how do we make messages stick? So these are the three topics we're going to be looking at today. So what does the challenge look like? So I'm going to just show you some pictures really that for me illustrates what we're up against as risk professionals. Did anyone wake up this morning and their head felt a bit like this? And I know it's only January, is it the 10th or 11th? So we're still coming out of the haze that was the Christmas holidays, if you took a holiday, if you celebrate Christmas. But if we had some kind of holiday, we come back and maybe our heads feel a bit like this. And this represents the clutter in our communication. In today's world, we've got a lot more opportunities now, different ways to communicate. But with more choices comes more confusion. And if you've ever sent somebody the wrong message on by text, or if you've ever posted the wrong message on the wrong WhatsApp group, then you'll know how difficult it is to cut through the clutter. Also, there's a statistic which I find really interesting, written by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in his book Flow. He was a Hungarian biologist, psychologist as well, I believe. He wrote a book called Flow in 2002. And he said that out of the millions of bits of information that we're all receiving every second, so right now, if you've got things coming in on other channels, we can only process 126 bits of it. So it's something like 0.0032. So we're massively filtering all the information that's coming in because we literally can't process it. And that was 2002. We're now in 2024, 22 years later, if my math serves me right. And so do we have less information coming in? I don't think so. We have exponentially more information coming in, I would imagine. So this problem is even worse. We're probably processing even less than what's actually coming in. And then there was also some research by Herman 100 years ago around memory recall 100 years ago, but still considered relevant today, which said that for people to remember information, you have to repeat it up to five to six times, because otherwise it doesn't stick. So literally our brains are like these little sand timers. So we're hearing all the information coming in, we're seeing it, we're feeling it, we're only processing a fraction of it. And then to make it stick, we need to keep turning over the sand timer. and let it run through again, because otherwise our brain is only remembering what's come in recently and it's not sticking. So if you ever feel like you've told somebody, maybe your children, something 5 or 6 times, then maybe that's what you needed to do for them to remember. And what have we got here? A massive elephant in the room. So you notice this session today is all about risk. But if you're working in health and safety, that specific area of risk, and just those words, health and safety, is a massive elephant in the room, because nobody really wants to think about something going wrong. They don't want to think about getting hurt. They don't ever think it's going to happen to them. Of course, I'm going to make an exception. When I say everyone, I'm generalizing, because of course, some of us are more up on the risk and we know that it's a possibility, but human nature really to think on the bright side and not really want to think about this, especially when we're having fun, because there's a perception that it gets in the way. So with all of this, when we communicate, we need to become massive magnets for people being drawn to our messages. And not only that, but people are all different. And so I use this analogy of a red onion. And remember, if you see any pictures, any slides that particularly jump out, just take a picture of the screen, and then you can use it for that great LinkedIn post to win yourself a safety chat box. So why are people like onions? Because people have massive layers. No one person is alike. We've all got different experiences, different ways of viewing things, and we've all got different personality preferences, different ways of communicating, reading into things, processing messages. And so, although you're trying to bring everyone together, in a way, you've also got to think about what bases do I need to cover so that I can get to some of these layers? Because the good news is that while everyone has a different set of layers, there are some commonalities. So if we want to communicate, to engage, connect, and persuade, this is the way we're going to get behavioral and culture change, because engage is about grabbing people's attention. So it's not for nothing that I've had pictures of elephants and onions on my screen, because my first challenge is to get your attention. Maybe you've already drifted off, but fingers crossed you're still with me. You can let me know on the chat, because on a webinar, I can't see your faces. So I don't know if you're with me, but I'm really fingers crossed that something I've said or something I've shown you has stood out. Once I've done that, then I need to tell it's still here. Great. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, James. Thanks, Nigel. Then I need to connect with you. So I need to say something that you can relate to. You think, yes, I can relate to that. That could happen to me. That's something I could use. And then once you found it interesting, I then need to persuade you to take some action, which is really interesting, the science of persuasion. I could be talking about this for weeks, but today I'm just going to give some hints here on methods you can use to persuade people. So how do we engage? So I'm going to give you a model for each of these 3 things: engage, connect, persuade, that might just give you a bit of a frame to think about how you communicate. So engaging is about grabbing people's attention. And somebody called Bernice McCarthy, who did a lot of research around learning styles in schools, and she discovered that when people learn, and also she got called into business to do the same work because her methods were proven to be powerful. She said that to get people's attention in the classroom, there were some that wanted the why. So why have you got me here? Why am I even here? So you notice at the beginning, I said to you, what's the risk of our messages not getting through? And I told the story about the tree. That was a bit of the why. So if any of you were sat there thinking, why am I here? That would have just checked we're all on the same page. A bit of what we need to do. So some of the what in this presentation is about giving you the 3 things that we were going to talk about today. How we're going to do it. So we're going to talk about a method for storytelling. That's a bit of the how. And then other people have a preference around what if. So if you're sat there and your brain's already sort of gone about 3 steps forward, thinking about, oh, hang on, I don't know how I'm going to do this. What if this? What if that? Then you might be in that what if category. So I'm not looking to stereotype, but if you think about when you communicate to a group, I'm going to have to cover these 4 bases, okay, to get people's attention. And then if I want to connect with them, so think about which of these brackets you might fall into. Some people like their information given to them on a visual format. And you can spot that because people will be talking in terms of visual language. So what would this look like? I need to see a picture of this. So probably if I've got good visuals on my screen, you will like that. Other people will be more auditory. And if you're the kind of person that could just listen to me talking while driving, even though I'm sort of droning on a bit, and I could make my voice a bit more interesting, but a lot of people find it hard just to listen. They need the visuals as well. If you could just listen to me while driving, then you're probably a bit more auditory. And we tend to stand up, like toolbox talk or a safety moment, and think just about the auditory without attending to our visuals. And also kinesthetic, can we turn up with a prop, for example, the safety chat box? You can't quite see it on here. Do I have something I can show you so you can sort of imagine getting your hands on this? And how this kinesthetic is, how will it feel? How will it work? What props can I bring in? Or how can I walk you through it? Let's walk through this together. Obviously not possible on a webinar, but I've got my one prop and doing my best with that. And then other people were thinking, well, what's the logic? So you may like, the process type communication. So you may take away from this engage, connect, persuade. That's a little process. You can see the logic in that and the cause and effect. And then, so you've got people on board, you've got their attention, you've connected with them in their communication style with the information in the way they want it. And then you're going to try and persuade them. And persuading them often means persuading them to do things differently. So you'll need to give people different things to persuade. You think about when you go to do something different, like buy a car, for example. I mean, some people want evidence of the need for change, they need some data that says this is the right thing to do right now. Other people want to see a vision. So I could say, well, this is my massive vision for doing things like this. And some of you would be, yes, I'm in, Karen. Others of you would be thinking, well, hang on, how's this going to impact the people? The risk professionals we've got involved in this, how are they going to feel about this? How we can get them bought in? How can we even help them along the way? And then when you're trying to get people to change, you often have people that you think are your detractors, but actually they're the people that can probably help you most because they are the people that are saying, do we really need to reinvent wheel? This box will be thinking, how are we going to make it work? Just checking you can still hear me okay. Just got a message, my internet connection was unstable. So hopefully you can still hear me. So the people in the how box really just want it to work. Thank you guys for staying with me and keeping me on track. How are we going to make this work? So if somebody says, do we really need to reinvent the wheel? All they're thinking is, hang on, it works right now. How's it going to work with this new vision? So the people that feel like they don't like what you're offering and they're challenging why you want to break away from the status quo can sometimes be the key to your success. So you're going to think about all these peeled off 3 layers of that onion for you. That is going to massively change the way you communicate. And then, so you're grabbing people's attention. How are you going to do that? How are you going to connect with them in a way that is comfortable with them? You might just have to change your language. And this works with individuals and groups. And how are you going to persuade them? And we might have to change the way people feel about risk. or health and safety, whatever the words are, depending on your job title related to risk, we might need to change the way people think about it. And one other way of doing it is not just about pushing your messages out in a different way, in different formats. It's about how do you act more like that magnet and bring people in. So one way to do that is through open questions, which is why I produced this chat box, which has got 100 open questions here based around 50 challenges you could get to safety or some other risk-based topic. And this is why open questions are important. And I know you probably know open questions are important. But if you think about it like this, we could go in with a closed question. Have you read the risk assessment? What are we going to get back? And it's important we know what we're going to get back. We're going to confirm a known problem. Either we suspect they have read it or they haven't read it. We're going to verify knowledge, because if they've read it, then we know we probably need to start from scratch. At the same time, know the impact that it could have on someone else. It can make someone else feel tested. If someone says, did you attend that webinar? Did you do that? Did you do that? Did you read the risk assessment? You may feel like, okay, I need to say yes because I'm being tested here, and saying yes is the right thing to do. Whereas if you ask an open question around that same topic, like, what stood out to you from that risk assessment? Or what was missing in that risk assessment for you? Then you're going to get the other person thinking. You might discover something about that risk assessment that you didn't know. Maybe there's a part that isn't very good. Maybe it's not clear enough. Maybe everybody said they read it, but they haven't because it's too complex. Not only will you get new insights, but they will as well, because you force them to think about it by asking them a question that nobody's ever asked them before. What was missing from that risk assessment for you? You're going to create some energy here. And this is where you start to get the engagement. Once you've got that energy, you've got people on side, then they're going to go with you. So open questions also engage, connect, and persuade. So you can really sort of shortcut that whole 3-step procedure just by asking somebody a great question. And then communicating to bring people together. So I've already talked about how different people can be, and you'll often find this as a barrier in an organization where you're working with different parts of the business, and they'll say, but hang on, our part of the business is different. That will never work here. And you can say, well, I understand it's different, but there is power in us all working together, in us boiling it down to the common denominator. So what is it that unites us rather than divides us? What is it that brings us together? Because if you can find a simple hook, a simple message, when you go into the detail in the application, you can customize. But if you can find a central message or a central set of behaviors or a central mantra, something that brings people together, you're going to start to get a bit of a domino effect. Because the domino effect, how does it work? We need to get the dominoes all lined up, and you need to have somebody to push the domino, and you need to have the alignment. So as soon as somebody is off alignment or off message, that domino effect is going to go off. You're not going to get the full impact. So if your messages are stopping at a certain part of the business, it's because you haven't got that alignment. And I have to say, of the work I've done in large organizations with culture change, one of the biggest impacts I've had is just a simple message that everybody could get behind. And it took me about 3 months to achieve it. A lot of conversations, starting with a long list of behaviors, going down to a short list, then coming up with a matrix on how did these behaviors apply to different parts of the business. And suddenly we not only had something everyone could get behind for a domino effect, but we also had something that embraced the differences. And I'm going to show you one way that you can also bring everyone together, a little tool which I've taken from Dilt's Logical Levels, which is around alignment in thinking. It's a tool you can use to pitch to the entire organization and make people feel really comfortable about what you're trying to do and their role in it. So you need to give them a vision for the change. You need to explain, give them an identity. It's like a badge. What's my role in this change? Who am I? What are the values and beliefs that line up with that? So what do we need to put most importance on to make this happen? And what do we need to believe? Because beliefs drive behaviors. And if you don't believe that, do you remember who was it that broke the record for the first 4-minute mile? It's gone straight out of my head, but there was somebody who did it in the 1960s, and the medical profession said it wasn't possible. It wasn't physically possible. He did it, and in the next 4 weeks, a load of other people did it as well. His name's gone right out of my head. Roger Bannister, that's the one. Great, thanks, Mark. So beliefs drive behaviors. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And that was a quote from Henry Ford. And then we need capabilities. So somebody might buy in so far to that level, and then they think, well, hang on, I just don't feel quite up to this. I'm going to need some training. And then you can explain, well, this is how we're going to help you with this. And you need to be clear what is it you want people to do. Because people can say, yes, that sounds like it in your manager. You think they've signed off to something, and then they exhibit behaviors that go against everything you thought you'd agree. Maybe because you weren't clear or you didn't agree on the expectations of behaviors. And then the environment, really, when everything else, the first 5 are lined up, you start to see shifts in the environment. Now, that is just a model right now. So what I'm going to do is show you how I would turn this into a pitch. And when I read this out to you, this is a pitch that has all 6 levels in it. It's not necessarily your pitch. I'm pitching it around safety, but just listen to it and think, how does this make me feel? Would I buy into this at all levels of the organization? So here we go. I want us to be the safest company in our industry. And I'm going to need leadership from every single one of you. It means no compromise on safety ever, and an unwavering belief that 100% safety is possible. We'll raise everyone's safety awareness levels and leadership skills so that everyone understands that following safety rules matters, and anyone can challenge anyone. I think that should be everyone can challenge anyone if the safety doesn't feel right. Imagine the change we can make to our workplaces together. Okay. So if you break that down, you can see the first line is the vision. Second one is the identity. We need everyone to be safety leaders. Third one is values and beliefs. Fourth one is capability. These are the capabilities we want and we're going to give you. The fifth one, there are 2 behaviors in there that we're asking from people. And again, this might look different at different levels of the organization, but it's that message that gets everyone to buy into it. And the last one is the environment. So what does good look like? Okay. So I asked you to think about how you felt when I was reading that, and it probably wasn't the best pitch I've ever given, but I tried to give it a bit of welly, and it's structured in a certain way to make you feel congruent. Okay, because if any of those 6 levels work like bricks, so if one is out of alignment, you feel kind of uncomfortable in getting involved in something. And people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. So how you make people feel is going to be important to whether people buy into your risk messages. So I think I'm going to have to hurry up just a little bit, but we're going into communicating to make your messages stick now. So I'm going to tell you another little story. So this was a couple of years ago. You may remember this, or you may have seen the Netflix documentary But there was a volcano eruption on White Island, New Zealand. Again, another tragedy, a very sad story. And I watched it all through personal stories on the Netflix documentary. And it was really gripping, probably the most gripping documentary I've ever seen. I couldn't even get up and make a cup of tea because the stories in it were really compelling. And you didn't really know what was going to happen because some people got out of this alive, other people sadly did not. And what really struck me right at the end was they were interviewing one of the tour guides, and she said, I knew the risks. I just thought it would never happen to me. And so if you can, that was me telling a story of some stories, but anything you can do with storytelling works really well to get risk messages across. Because first of all, they're relatable. So they're human stories, and you can if you watch that Netflix documentary, you can imagine yourself going off on holiday somewhere where there's risks all around you, and anyone can imagine themselves getting caught up in that volcano eruption. Actually, I've been and stood on a live volcano, so that was particularly poignant to me, and probably something I won't be doing again. So they're relatable, they're compelling, because as the story unfolds, you don't quite know how it's going to turn out. So that invokes the hormone dopamine when you're sort of hooked on knowing what's going to happen next. It's really gripping story that releases your oxytocin, which causes you to want to take action. So this is proven stories change the hormone, because stories, all you've got to do is remember one part of the story, and your brain stores information in topics. So if you can remember one particular part of the story, you can normally piece together the rest, and they are memorable for all those reasons. So they're easy to retell. And if you think about the risk messages that you're trying to get through, one of the powerful risk tools I think we have is the hierarchy of controls. But if you just put that on a screen and you talk people through that, it's effective, but it can be a bit dry. But if you think about this slide here, this is actually White Island, New Zealand. This is people stood there, tourists looking at this volcano. This was before the eruption. If people really understood the hierarchy of controls, they wouldn't be wondering whether to put those hats on or not. They'd be asking themselves whether they should be stood there at all. So going right up to the top of the hierarchy of controls. So you see, I could have told that story, just to get the hierarchy of controls message out there. So you pick a message that is not getting through, a simple one like the hierarchy of controls, and find some stories to tell it. And then you can bring in your hierarchy of controls at the end, because by that time, the dopamine and oxytocin are running. You've opened people's eyes, you've got their attention, and they're more likely to take on board what you're going to tell them. So the question is, what's your story? Who's it for, and what do you want them to do differently after hearing it? So here's a story that I've been telling a bit lately, and you're probably looking at the screen and thinking it's a story for snowboarders or skiers. Not even for snowboarders or skiers, not even for sports people, though I could tell it for sports people. But this is more a story for shift workers, and I'm going to show you why. And I'm going to show you a little 5-step structure that I use to tell a story, and it allows you to stay on track. So I haven't really rehearsed this story, but I'm going to tell you the story. I know it, it's mine. I'm going to tell you using this 5-step structure. So I'm going to set the scene, then I'm going to talk about a setback, and that's when the dopamine happens because you're thinking, oh, what's going to happen next? The shift in mindset, when did I start to get the learning? What was the secret? What's the secret that I learned? And what's the step I want other people to take? So here we go. So I want you to imagine this. It was about 8 years ago. And as you saw from the picture, it was a beautiful sunny day. I was out on a snowboarding trip, and I was with about 20 skiers, and I was the only snowboarder. And so 8 years ago, I was snowboarding the best of my life, really confident, going really fast, absolutely feeling top of the world, that I really could do anything. So imagine the horror when I suddenly find myself hanging by my fingertips off the edge of the piste with a pain in my ankle. And I'm looking down and thinking, how's this going to turn out? As it happens, you'll be pleased to know I got away with a broken ankle that really had a bit of an impact on my life for the next 8 months, which I won't bore you with, but it wasn't easy anyway. But I got back to my normal self. I'm able to walk and run. And as I thought back about what had happened to me, because the thing is about when you have an accident, you get a bit of time on your hands. You've got time to sort of sit back and think, how did it get to this? And what I remembered, what really stood out for me, there was a moment before that last run. So this accident happened just before lunch. And I remember it was time to go down for lunch. We got to the bottom of the piece. There was the restaurant, and someone said, oh, anyone fancy an extra one last run? And I was feeling so good. I was probably feeling overconfident. Adrenaline was running. I was tired, but I wasn't really thinking about that. And I said, yes, I'll go for that extra run. And there were only 4 of us went for the extra run. And I wondered if fatigue had a role to play in that. And that's what I want to talk to you today, because it was my choice to accept that extra run. And if you think about, if you're a shift worker in particular, fatigue can have an impact. In fact, fatigue is also implicated in 20% of road accidents. Fatigue is played a role in major disaster like Clapham rail disaster, the Challenger disaster, Chernobyl. But fatigue can be an everyday thing. And if you work a shift, the UK Working Time Directive says that you can't work more than 48 hours a week. But what it actually says is that your company can't oblige you to work more than 48 hours a week. So if somebody says, if you've worked 48 hours and somebody says, do you fancy an extra shift? And you're thinking about the money, it can be very easy to say yes. So you can voluntarily accept that extra shift. But if you accept that extra shift, then there's a chance, if you're tired, that you're putting yourself at more risk of an accident. And you don't want to be that person that is thinking back and thinking, I wish I'd said no. So what I would like you to do is the next time you are offered that extra shift, just to think about, my head's saying yes, but what is my body saying? Okay, so I've told you that story, and you can probably see how I've gone through. I tried to follow it with my mouse, these 5 stages. So this can make it really easy. Oh, yeah, so maybe we've all done some shifts, and a shift can be a general term for just saying no sometimes in the workplace when you're tired. And so just to come to the end of this now, because I wanted to leave time for a couple of questions. This is how I view communication. We tend to think of it as this sender-receiver model. We send the message, somebody says they've received it. But actually, the meaning of communication really is the response you get, which is great because it gives us the opportunity to do things differently. So if you're communicating about something to do with risk and it's not getting through, instead of getting frustrated, and I know, okay, frustrated, I've been frustrated as well. And you're just thinking, why are they not getting this? Just think about, well, the response is not the response I wanted. What response did I want? And what do I need to do differently to get a different response? And the great thing is you can just go and try something different. So today we've talked about communicating differently, taking a risk, communicating to engage, connect, and persuade, bring people together, and make your messages stick. Because there's a time to light a fire beneath people. Of course, we know we work in the risk profession. There's a time when you just need to get a message across and fast. But if you've got a bit more time in your hands and you're going more strategically about this, you know you're going to get the best effort from others, not by lighting a fire beneath them, but by building a fire within. So I hope today, I'm sure you already had a fire raging within, and I'm preaching to the already converted, but there'll be other people in your business where the fire within is not raging for risk, for your risk topic. So hopefully that's given you some inspiration to try something else. Okay, so I'm just going to stop talking now because I think we probably have a couple of minutes for some questions, probably about 10 minutes, although I'm going to hand over to Lauren, maybe to see if there's any questions. And just to remind you, so in the 24 hours after this session, just write something about this session on LinkedIn, maybe something that particularly struck you. Take a picture of one of the slides if you want, and I'm going to pick one of those posts. I'm going to contact you, and I'm going to send you, if you can see it, you maybe can't see it. I'm going to send you a safety chat box. Okay, thanks, Lauren. Over to you. I can't hear you, Lauren. You're on mute.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for that presentation. It's a really great presentation. It doesn't look like we've got anything in the chat at the moment or in the Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please do bring them in. I'll start off, I suppose. Do you have any examples of any of these techniques making a real impact in the workplace?
Yes, actually, I'm just going to mention what I think it was Bill said then about using the word risk instead of health and safety. Remember, I talked about the elephant in the room, and it's something I've only more recently become aware of because my first experience in health and safety was in a company that had a massive safety culture. So I didn't have so much of an issue with the elephant in the room, but I actually think using the term risk is definitely really useful in terms of not only overcoming the elephant in the room, but also, I guess, tapping into broader risks, getting the risks you're looking at on the overall risk profile. So to go back to your question, examples of things with a massive impact. I think, well, I gave one example about a set of behaviors I produced, and sometimes you find that you can come up with this great strategic plan on how you're going to engage people in risk management or health and safety. And as fast as you set up the plan, things start to move in the business and change. So you need to think about what is your hook? What's the one thing that's going to stay solid even when the business is a bit like a moving carpet? And there was one company when I spent months drafting 7 leadership behaviors that aligned with the business, aligned with health and safety. They were based on the type of incidents we were having. So they were really evidence-based. So then keep your communication in the positive. You know, what do you want people to do in terms of behaviors? Keep it simple. So between 3 and 7 things, and make it evidence-based, because if you've gone through your own incidents and look at what would make the biggest difference, then people are going to buy into it, because people won't, if it looks like you've just taken something from another company or you've just thought of something over a glass of wine, they're going to think, what relevance does this have to my everyday work? So you need to really come up with the evidence. I'm just looking at the other questions. How have you find this moves from through the chain within the business? Yeah, there seems to be a theme there about getting senior management on board. And I think what I've learned, both inside companies and working as a consultant, that it's one thing to get everyone in a room, get them excited about health and safety. And this may sound difficult in itself. It's one thing to get people excited. It's another thing to get them to follow through on that excitement. And this is why there's two other key words: expectations and behaviors. So let's say you've gone in, you've done a fantastic pitch. You said, everyone said, yes, this is the right thing to do. We need to put health and safety, not necessarily first, because that can be deprioritized, but at the heart of the business. And then you need to go in. So, okay, if we do this, this is what you can expect. Are you okay with this? Because often senior management will expect an immediate reduction in incidents, and that's not viable because it takes longer than that. It's also not realistic because there are so many other factors that are going to influence the incidents, not just what you're doing. So you need to be clear on what you can influence, how you're going to measure it, how long it's going to take, and what behaviours you need from them and the rest of the organisation to do that. So it's a real comprehensive strategic plan. And the greatest success I've had is when you take the time to think all of those things through. So I think that's probably answered some of, I looked, there was about 5 questions and it seemed to be all around that theme. So hopefully, Lauren, I've answered some of those in one.
Yeah, I think so. There was a lot of questions about whether you prefer communicating with the senior management or throughout the organization. And yes, so I think that was all covered there really well. We did have one question on the Q&A. So it's an anonymous attendee, so would like more information on how to use the kinesthetic part of communication. If you have any examples.
Yeah, well, maybe I can do a bit of a follow-up post on LinkedIn or something. I mean, but basically kinesthetic is about how people feel inside, and also it's about learning by doing. So if people you know, if you're telling people that you want them to do something different, you need to give them an opportunity to try it out. So often this is through an exercise, trying something out. For example, if I wanted to tap into kinesthetic learners, I would be talking about how people would feel. And I would also probably, like, let's say I was doing storytelling, I would put people in groups and get them to actually practice their storytelling with that structure. So it's learning by doing, and it's also using language that taps into how people feel. So hopefully that's answered that question.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Dan wants to know a bit more about your chat box. If you wanted to plug that a bit more.
Yeah, so these chat boxes, it's like a little box of playing cards. There are 50 cards in here. Each of the card has a common objection to health and safety. So if I take the first one out, it says we've always done it that way. And you've probably heard more than 50 objections to it. And on the back, so if you start to think, well, what's the one that I most often get? Let's say it's this one. You've got 2 questions on the back that can challenge it. What would happen if you didn't? And what would make you want to do it differently? So it's going to get people a bit rabbit in the headlights. Whoa, nobody's ever asked me that. And it's going to get them seeing things a little bit differently and hopefully start a different conversation. Because, you know, when people say things about health and safety, and I've had it in the past, you know, I've been in a meeting and somebody said, well, who's going to pay for that? And it's kind of so obvious to you because we know this isn't cost, it's an investment. And you're so blown away by the objection that you just don't know how to respond to it. But when you start seeing some of these on the cards, you think, oh, next time somebody says that to me, I'm going to go in with this question and just see what happens. So I've just started, they've just been released, and oh, yes, James has got one. Yeah, so people have ordered them. They are out there. The first batch has gone, and we're just waiting to see how people are using them. So I, for one, am very excited, and I'm excited to give one away to the best LinkedIn post on this session in the next 24 hours. I can't wait. Let's all get excited on LinkedIn and let somebody win a chat box. Might even give away 2 if there's 2 good ones. Feeling generous today.
I think that's it, Karen. Thank you very much for joining us today. We, as a group, are really interested in your feedback. So, yeah, any feedback would be really, really welcomed, and especially on topics that you might want to see in future webinars. So, yeah, please do feedback on that. I think that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.